Hey everyone, this is Vince, and you're watching or listening to The Gospel According to Stephen King. And today I'm going to look at The Stand. So I know when I make these videos, I realize it's sort of misleading to call it The Gospel According to Stephen King because I think that stories are really independent of their authors. Stories take on a life of their own. They have a message of their own. And Stephen King would really agree with this. He talks about how stories go in different directions than he wants them to. And in fact, we're going to see that with The Stand. King says that when he writes, he doesn't even know what the themes of the story are because the themes are also independent of him. And so he actually he writes the first time, and then he reads it and figures out what the themes are. He finds the themes, and then he rewrites to draw out those themes. But anyway, so the gospel message of, if there is a gospel message in The Stand or in any book, it is independent of what that author thinks. And so I think that's kind of neat, and I think that's something we need to keep in mind. So in this video, I'm going to do a few things. Since first I'm going to be talking about the gospel, so I'm going to define gospel, or at least what I mean when I say that word. And that word's going to have something to do with evil and a liberation from evil. So the next thing I'm going to do is talk about evil in the book and the nature of evil, and then especially fear in the book, and how evil and fear are overcome finally. So that's going to be like a liberation or setting free from evil. And in fact, I think that that the point of the book is really misunderstood, or the ending at least is. I've read so many people, and I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos where people really get the ending wrong, and so they get the message wrong. And so I'm going to first talk about what is not the gospel, or what is the ending not doing, and then after I do that, I'm going to talk about what the ending does do for us, and how it shows us how evil is overcome according to The Stand. While I personally have published in literary criticism, my main field of study was religion, and I work as a Disciples of Christ pastor. So while I'm going to look at the book and the narrative of the book, I'm also going to make some connections with the religion of Jesus. And I'm really hesitant there to say Christianity, because I fear that evangelicals have really taken over that word, and so many people today are starting to see that word as meaning intolerance, arrogance, and study after study shows that they're definitely starting to see the word Christian nationalism there. So, and I think that's a big misrepresentation of what Jesus taught. So anyway, as we go through, I'm going to look at correlations between the gospel of The Stand and the gospel of Jesus. Okay, so what is a gospel? In short, the word gospel is a Greek word that means good news. It's not a book of the Bible, like we have the gospel according to Matthew, the gospel according to Mark, and the gospel according to Luke, and the gospel according to John. And so we talk about the gospel as though it's a certain book, and it's a book that tells the story of Jesus. That's not what gospel means. In fact, this word was used before the gospel writers of the New Testament wrote. And at that time, what it meant was something like political liberation. It meant military victory, liberating from your oppressors. So Caesar would come into town and kill all the people on the other side, and then put a sword to your neck and say, do you accept the good news of Caesar? That you are liberated? And if you said no, they'd kill you. And if you said yes, you'd live under Caesar's rule. So that was really good news, right? That and it wasn't good for everybody, but some people really thought that was good news. In Christianity, well, at least when Christianity is developing and these gospel writers are starting to write, they really took this word and turned it into something very different. In fact, it almost started to be like a sermon, but it was still good news. They were teaching good news, but really this time from evil, like it is a liberation from evil. And that's exactly what we're going to do when we look at The Stand. We're going to look at what is that way that we are liberated from evil. So let's talk about what is evil. What is evil in The Stand? Well, in The Stand, there's no doubt that Randall Flagg is the symbol for evil. And Randall Flagg is going to be a symbol for evil in a lot of King books. However, it is narrow-sighted to look at only Flagg. In fact, Flagg only shows up because of the human evil of creating the virus. He's really just an entity that seems to show up in the middle of human suffering, and his goal seems to be to maximize that suffering. For instance, we meet him on the road after the superflu is dying down. He doesn't know really anything about himself. He doesn't know how he got there or where he came from. Like, the one thing that he does know is he's got big plans for evil and chaos. And if you read the uncut version, you know that even after the end of the book, he reemerges, and he reemerges in a new place, and he looks to use different people for what is going to amount to evil purposes. All right, this is the first appearance of Flagg, by the way, in the Stephen King universe. The big novels that he appears in are The Eyes of the Dragon, this one, and the Dark Tower series. But you know what? It's really important to note that Flagg is never the one in charge. Like, he's never the boss. He's always working to orchestrate evil on behalf of somebody else, or like I said, the evil's already there, and now he's just making the most out of it. So anyway, I find that very interesting. People who read King novels often like to think of Flagg as that he's very, very powerful. He's not. He seems to always get his powers from other, and he seems to always draw off of the pain and anger of others. Okay, so that to say, when we're looking to define evil in The Stand, we need to look further back, like look at the big picture. And the book is pretty adamant that if we want to look for evil, we need to look no further than ourselves. Like, society is naturally evil. Human beings hurt each other, they use each other. Human beings were destined to blow themselves up. Like, if it was not the human-made virus, like in this book, it would have been the A-bomb. And if it was not that, it would have been something else. So humans are naturally evil. But there is some hope when reading this book. You say, well, maybe everyone's not evil. Maybe it's just some people. Once most of the world's population dies out, people begin having dreams, and some people end up going to the free zone, or Mother Abigail's community, what we might think of as the good community, and others go to Las Vegas, or Flagg's community, what we might think of as the bad community. And so you start to think, okay, this means that roughly half the population is naturally evil, and roughly half the population is naturally good. But we're already starting to have some uneasy feelings about that because of the dreams. So half of these people dreamed about Mother Abigail, and they go to her community, again, the good community, but everyone dreams about Randall Flagg. And so why would that happen if half are good and half are bad? Like, shouldn't the good ones dream of Mother Abigail and the bad ones dream of Flagg? So there is some foreshadowing here that what we're going to see happening in these separate communities. And that's going to have something to do with the fact that evil seems to be around us. It seems to be natural. And that is what we find. When we look at those communities, especially like when we look at the free zone starts to show signs of becoming evil. They start to develop mob mentality, especially toward Harold and towards outsiders. Some start to play politics, and they vie for more powerful positions. More than once, Stu asks, like, aren't we supposed to be the good side? What's wrong with us? We don't seem like we're the good side anymore. And what's funny is it seems like King did mean for that to be the good side. Like, he says that he wanted this to be like a Lord of the Rings, good versus evil. But as he was writing it, he was learning that he was having these problems with Mother Abigail's side and with the free zone. And so he ended up having a big case of writer's block, he said. He didn't quite know where to take the story. So listen, here is a quote from one of the main characters I want to read to you. This is Glenn Bateman. So if you don't remember, Glenn is the retired sociology professor, and he's asked at one point, like what do you think is going to happen now after the super flu, what do you think is going to happen? And he says, show me a man or a woman alone, and I'll show you a saint. Give me two, and they'll fall in love. Give me three, and they'll invent the charming thing we call society. Give me four, and they'll build a pyramid. Give me five, and they'll make one an outcast. Give me six, and they'll reinvent prejudice. Give me seven, and in 7 years they'll reinvent warfare. Man may have been made in the image of God, but human society was made in the image of his opposite number, and is always trying to get back home. So the theme that we see here is that there seems to be like some self-destruct button built into human nature. There is a natural human tendency toward evil. And of course, we see the same thing in Christianity. God creates human beings in God's image. God says, you are good. However, people start to create idols of themselves. This is what Paul talks about in Romans chapter 1, by the way, that God creates everything good, but then humans start to worship themselves. They start to worship other things. They start to be selfish and violent toward one another. So really, in Christianity, as in the stand, like that is the evil, and something needs to be done to save humanity from itself. Okay, what is the role of fear? There is one way in which the free zone and the community in Las Vegas are different. And we read about this when we read about the story of the spies that were sent over. So Dana Juarez was one of the spies. Dana was in the free zone, and she was sent over to spy on the Las Vegas community. And when she was over there, she marveled at how the people were the same. Like they looked like the same as the people in the free zone. But the one big difference she noticed was, she said, these people over here are always afraid. Now, to be fair, the good community, or Mother Abigail's community in Boulder, they're also afraid. They're afraid of Flagg, and they're afraid of the other community, but they don't base all of their decisions on it. They don't live their lives based on fear. They certainly aren't collecting planes and weapons like Flagg's side. But we can imagine that they would in the future. Remember, both sides are human, and humans have this tendency towards evil. But with Flagg's community, we start to see how their evil is fostered by fear. Fear in the stand is not the evil, but it cultivates that evil. Flagg maintains order out of fear. People struggle very hard to follow his demands because they fear him. Although here we do see some problems, because while people want to do what Flagg wants them to do because they're scared of him, they still fail. And when they do, Flagg kills them, and most of the time by crucifixion. And there's a lot of symbol in that, yeah. I mean, Randall Flagg, the dark man, the personification of evil crucifying people who don't follow him. So anyway, yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that fear in us makes that evil come out. Okay, so let's look at the ending. What does not liberate us from evil, or misreading the ending? And so what we've seen is that evil in this book is a natural human tendency. We have a natural tendency to hurt one another. We've seen what fear is, at least we've seen what it does. Fear cultivates that evil. What we're now going to do is see how are we set free from that according to the stand. And to answer that, I first want to answer how we're not free from that. I want to show you how most people misread the end of the book. And in doing that, how you might get this false narrative about how the stand shows that we are set free from evil, or what the gospel according to the stand is. It's also going to have a lot to do with sacrifice. And so I'm also naming this section a misunderstanding of sacrifice. Okay, so here is a truncated summary of the ending. Mother Abigail goes on a pilgrimage to talk with God. She returns and tells the 5 remaining main characters, that's Fran and Stu and Larry and Ralph and Glenn, that the 4 men need to go make a stand. This is why the book's called The Stand. So like a lot rides on this. This is where evil is going to confront good. This is going to be the final showdown, the final battle. Stu, by the way, if you don't remember, as they're on their way, Stu breaks his leg and he has to go back. So now we have Ralph, Larry, and Glenn going on. They get captured, or I guess you can't really say captured if they wanted to go, but anyway, they go and they're taken to Flagg. Flagg, they're put in these jail cells individually. Flagg goes to see Glenn. He has Glenn shot by Lloyd, and then the next day, he's going to put Ralph and Larry on these platforms. He's going to pull them apart in front of the whole community. And so he's doing that. They're up there. They're being ripped apart, and or they're going to be. And just then, the trash can man shows up, and he has an atomic bomb, and he wants to give it to Flagg as a present. And he's also really sorry for some stuff that he's done, so he wants to present it to Flagg as like a peace offering. And all of a sudden, as Flagg is talking to Trash, Ralph sees what he calls the hand of God come out of the sky and touch the bomb, and it detonates. Now, there's actually a lot more to the story than that, and I'm going to share that with you in a minute. But since so many people read the story that way, as if those are the big details, then I want to talk about this for a minute. Like, what if that really was the ending? The four men go, they make their stand, they're about to be killed, but right before that happens, God intervenes. Like, a fair question to ask is, okay, what exactly did the men do? Why was it important for them to go and make a stand? And in fact, that is a criticism that I hear so much about this book is that in the end, the stand didn't mean anything because these men didn't do anything. Trash would have still brought the bomb, like no matter what, and then would God have detonated it though? And so if God would have detonated this bomb, then the men wouldn't have had to go. So if you're going to say that God would not have detonated though, then what the men did by taking the stand was they were willing to die, right? And so what you say is that God just needed a sacrifice. These men had to go in order to placate God or to convince God to do it. And by the way, this is certainly how that really dumb miniseries in the 90s saw it. Like, if you've ever seen the first movie, in fact, it has God talking out of the hand. God says something about judgment on Flagg, and then goes down to the bomb, and before it detonated, God says, "Good job, boys." And then, like with this really cheesy line, "Come on home." And Larry cries and says, "Take us home." And then, so anyway, I cringe every time I think about the ending of that movie. But again, God says, like, "Good job." And so the question is, like, good job of doing what? Being prepared to die? Good job of convincing you to intervene? It's really ambiguous there. And again, this is a misunderstanding of the ending. And in fact, I think it mirrors a huge misunderstanding in Christianity also. The God of Christianity is often seen as a God that needs to be appeased. Like, God is angry and Jesus is killed as a sacrifice. And that makes God happy. And then not only does he not kill everyone, which he was going to do anyway, but he grants all of them this eternal life in heaven if they take on that sacrifice of Christ. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, we would talk about how God was going to welcome us into heaven by saying, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant." But the question that needs to be asked is, okay, what exactly did I do well? Like, what did I do except that Jesus' sacrifice was for me? So anyway, in Christianity as well on the stand, I think that there is a misunderstanding of what sacrifice is, and that leads to a misunderstanding of the gospel message in the stand and in Christianity. So if proper sacrifice doesn't liberate us from evil, what does liberate us from evil? Like, if that's not how it's done, then how is it done according to the stand? What is the gospel message? So here's what actually happens at the end of the stand. It starts off with Mother Abigail. She actually tells them when she comes back from her pilgrimage, she says, go make a stand, but she says, walk there and don't take anything with you. And that's very reminiscent of the scene in Salem's Lot. That's the book that was written previously to this one, where Father Callahan is facing off against Barlow. Barlow says, throw down your cross, and Callahan is too afraid to throw down his cross. And we're told as the reader that if he would have, he would have banished Barlow right then and there. But he was too scared, and so Barlow ends up winning that confrontation. There's also a neat comparison to be made here with Christianity. In the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's this same story that's told about how Jesus sends out his disciples to fight against evil. Like he's ostensibly teaching them to be one of his disciples, and he sends them out in groups of two, and he tells them, don't take anything with you for your journey. So in all three cases, the implication seems to be, don't put your faith in stuff. There is nothing that your stuff can do to fight evil. You have to be the one to do it. So whatever it is that frees us from evil, it's not found out there in weapons or in faith symbols even, but it's found in here in us. So so that's Mother Abigail was the first thing. The second thing is Glenn. When the three men go to Las Vegas, they're all put in these separate jail cells, like I said. Flagg goes with Lloyd to Glenn, and he expects Glenn to be very terrified of him. But instead, Glenn starts to laugh at him. So remember, Flagg operates out of fear, and he can't get this guy to be afraid of him. And worse, Glenn keeps laughing, and the more he laughs, the madder Flagg gets. Not only that, but the more out of control he gets. So Flagg ends up telling Lloyd to shoot Glenn, and that's when Flagg comes up with this idea for Larry and Ralph, that he's going to have them ripped apart. This is not the first time that people stood up to Flagg, like Glenn stands up to Flagg. Probably the most obvious one is with Nadine. If you don't remember this, Nadine is the girl who escapes from the free zone with Harold. She's meant to have a child with Flagg, and so she saves her virginity for him. So she finally has sex with him. She conceives his child, but it really destroys her own mind in the process, and she's now catatonic. But right before Larry and the crew get to Las Vegas, she starts to talk. And she makes this speech to Flagg about how he operates out of fear and that the other side is going to destroy him. And the more she talks, the madder that Flagg gets. And he ends up going and throwing her off the balcony before he realizes that he killed his child in the process. So Nadine was able to free herself from Flagg by speaking up to him. And that's consistent with the entire book. Like, as time goes on, people start to disrespect Flagg more and more. I mean, not to his face, but they start to lose faith in him. Like, they wonder how come he couldn't see that third spy. So do you remember Tom Collins was there and Flagg couldn't see him? And probably what we're led to believe is because he's mentally handicapped. They wonder how he couldn't get information from Dana. Dana, like Nadine, was able to really kill herself, but because before Flagg could get any information out of her. Many people even left the camp, and all the while this is happening, we watch Flagg as he gets less and less powerful and more out of control and more confused. Okay, so Glenn, stands up to Flagg, and he gets shot. And then Flagg has this plan to put Larry and Ralph in cages and have them torn apart in front of the whole community. So again, make them fear me. But when they're in their cages at the very end, Larry makes this impassioned speech to everyone. And he talks about how this isn't right. The only reason that you're letting him do this is because you are afraid. And then the speech has no effect. They're about to go ahead and do the thing. But then Whitney Horgan, Flagg's cook, comes forward and he speaks on behalf of the men. And so after he gives his big speech about how we shouldn't be afraid, need to ask everybody, let's all stand up against him, Flagg pulls him to him. He creates a small blue fireball, and he uses it to, basically kill Horgan. And that's when Trash shows up. So now Flagg is almost out of control. He's angry, he's confused, he's yelling at Trash, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to be here. This isn't right." And then all the while he's talking, this blue ball that he created goes up into the sky, and it turns into a hand shape, and then it comes down and it touches the bomb. So what I'm getting at is that this is not really the hand of God. Like, God is not intervening on behalf of Larry and Ralph in order to send them to heaven. And if you want to say it is the hand of God, then it's certainly the hand of God made from the overcoming of Flagg. Like, the book never says, though, that this is the hand of God or that God is intervening. Ralph sees it and calls it the hand of God. And later, Stu says it looked like the hand of God when he was returning to Boulder with Tom. This is one reason, besides the cheesy dialogue, that I really hate the first movie so much, because it even has God speak. God doesn't like part the clouds of heaven in the book. You don't see God give a wink and then detonate the bomb. Like, it's something that is created by Flagg. In fact, that's really the problem with the 2020 movie also. It was much better done, I thought, but it doesn't have Flagg create the blue ball at the end. So Flagg doesn't end up creating this thing. What ends up happening is before Flagg kills the people from Boulder, a storm comes up. So it's independent of Flagg, right? This is the movie, not the book. The storm comes up and it envelops the whole town, and then lightning shoots all over the place, and it targets Flagg directly. And then it becomes a hand and it detonates the bomb. So what I'm getting at is, in both movies, they had to create things or leave things out in order to bring in this false narrative that God is intervening because of the sacrifice that God was given. What's actually happening is Flagg is losing his power because people stood up to him. And in the end, he ends up destroying himself. What this ending is showing is that evil and fear are unstable. And so the gospel message here is that we are liberated from evil when we learn to stand up to it, and when we let it have no power over us. And this, of course, is echoed in Christianity, where redemption is found only after one dies to themselves. Real salvation or abundant life only comes when we die to our sinful nature and live in unity with others. In fact, what the Apostle Paul says in Galatians is like, we're born into selfishness. We know how to hate others. Like, we know how to love ourselves and to hate others and to try and get ahead, to look out for number one. Like, we know how to do that stuff. That's what we're born into. In fact, Paul calls that the guiding principles of the world, or better, the ABCs of the world. Putting ourselves first, learning how to protect ourselves. But when we die to that sinful nature, then we take on this loving nature of Christ, and now we're able to actually love one another and give to one another. So that's how this is mirrored in Christianity. Now, I don't want to imply, though, that in the book, The Stand, that there's not a God. Like, in the world of The Stand, God does exist. I think that's clear, first off, from the dreams of Mother Abigail. And I certainly think that we get it from Mother Abigail when she takes her pilgrimage and then comes back and she realizes how to overcome evil. But God is not the active agent, or at least God acts through human agents. You know, it's like the song from Jewel, we are God's hands and God's eyes. And this is pretty consistent with the Stephen King universe. Evil acts on its own, like in It or Christine or Tack in Desperation and the Regulators. But good acts through human agents. Like, even in It, the turtle doesn't really do anything. It gives advice and it inspires, but it doesn't do anything. I guess you can make a case for Insomnia, but even then, God acts, or at least the good forces act through Ralph. And of course, this having a human agent is echoed in Christianity. It's like Rob Bell, the Christian author, says, God needs a body. Like God works through the patriarchs, God works through the prophets, and ultimately God works through Jesus. Okay, a final theme that I want to mention comes at the ending of the book, and it is the true nature of sacrifice. So sacrifice, like I said, is not, or at least in the Stand, and I believe in Christianity too, sacrifice is not about appeasing God. It's about bearing testimony. It is a sacrifice of ourselves for what we believe. In other words, the death of Larry and Ralph and Glenn and the death of Jesus in Christianity was not about appeasing God and forcing God's hand to act or begging God to, like, is my sacrifice appeasing you? If it's good enough, then you're going to act. They were sent there in order to literally stand. They were sent to stand up to evil, to bear witness to justice and love, and more importantly, to overcome fear. And that's exactly what we see in Christianity with Jesus, is Jesus standing up for the marginalized and the poor, and standing up for, or standing up against power and political powers and religious powers. All right, so that is the gospel according to the Stand as I see it. Humans have a natural tendency towards hate and evil, and that natural tendency is kicked into gear by fear. And that tendency can only be overcome when we stand up to fear and unmask it for its lack of power and the lack of power that it has. When we as humans learn to accept others, to choose nonviolence over violence, to refuse to scapegoat others, then evil ultimately destroys itself. All right, so what'd you think? Did that message resonate with you? Do you think I missed something? Let me know in the comments. I think that would generate a lot of really good discussion. If you're interested in the gospel according to Stephen King, or Stephen King's books, or if you're interested in hearing the Christian gospel, like maybe in a different light than you previously have, I invite you to check out my channel and possibly subscribe.